Welcome back to the College Cinephile. I'm Isaiah, and in honor of the release of Avengers Endgame, we have been reviewing the main three trilogies in the MCU. We have reviewed Captain America and Iron Man's trilogy, which you can watch on our channel now. But if you want to watch this one instead, we are reviewing the final trilogy, which is Thor, and it's overall a mixed bag. With me is Ethan to talk about it. So Ethan, let's start off with Thor.
Thor.
What are your comments on the whole story of it all?
I think it's fine. I watched it once. I don't really ever want to watch it again.
Same here. It's pretty mediocre of a story, honestly.
It makes sense that the what they decided to go for was him being a fish out of water, which is fine, and there's some cute jokes in there. But in general, I think they kind of, halfway committed to the Asgard bit and halfway committed to the Earth bit, so that neither one really becomes totally fleshed out. And in general, it's just kind of fine.
Yeah, like a comment that I have on both Thor and Thor the Dark World is just that to me, there's just a really good movie in the background, but instead we have all this other like unnecessary stuff in the foreground.
Yeah.
The background stuff to me that's the best about Thor is the whole father and brother dynamic between Odin, Thor, and Loki.
Yeah.
I think that stuff is really good. Loki has a really great scene with Odin in the trophy room where he's talking about, am I really the monster that people like talk about at night, and like, you never loved me. He just wants to be loved, man. And this movie, I think it does in service of the universe, really knocks it out of the park of establishing Loki as a really sympathetic character.
Right.
And makes him a much stronger villain when we see him in Avengers.
They do make him sympathetic. I think he is not the Loki that we know from the Avengers going forward.
True.
Because, Hiddleston's the MVP of the first few Marvel movies, and really because Loki's just a little stinker, but he's not quite there in Thor. He's just kind of broody, and he's good at brooding, but he just doesn't have the fun charisma that we get to know and love from him. And I think that's just because Kenneth Branagh hadn't quite fleshed out the character, and then J.J. Abrams came in and kind of figured out who he would be going forward, and that really worked, as we will discuss in Thor the Dark World. But he's pretty good. Chris Hemsworth is fine in it. He's got a pretty bad dye job on his beard.
Oh, yeah. Like, very bad. Like, I don't know why. Like, there's blonde people with, like, brown eyebrows.
Yeah,
I don't know why they thought he has to be completely blonde.
So what do you think about the Earth characters in the movie?
Meh, basically. It's one of those secondary characters that you're just like, I just wish we could go back to, the actual main plot. It's just every time we're with them, it's just like, they're fine. They're just not fully fleshed out. And Natalie Portman, great actress. Very poorly written character. She tries her best with it, but it's just, she's that typical, girlfriend to the big hunky superhero. Like, she's supposed to be smart and a scientist, and when she has the scenes that she's supposed to prove herself as a scientist, she just says a bunch of sciencey words, and that's it. We never see her actually being smart, and whenever she's around Thor, she's all like lovey-dovey and like, oh, Thor,
Yeah, I think my favorite part of it is the 5 minutes where they set up Hawkeye for no reason. He's just there. I'm like, okay, great. That's kind of, public enemy number one with the Marvel movies is setting up stuff that they just got to get in there.
And especially in Phase 1, that's where it's like at its biggest. Yeah. But I think like another like visual like complaint I do have with the movie as well is there's like a ton of Dutch angles.
A lot.
Yeah, Dutch angles are just like...
loves them Dutch angles.
Yeah, in case you don't know, it's when like the camera tilts to the side to be dramatic. Yep. And, this movie uses it to the point where it's not even being dramatic.
So moving on now to Thor the Dark World, the movie that I like a little bit more than you, which is where I think we disagree. I think my big thing, why I kind of like Thor 2 more than other people do, because a lot of people have it at the very bottom of their rankings. Mm-hmm. I just like that they kind of go, all in on the kind of fantasy aspect of it, kind of how dorky it is, which is sort of, at the beginning they're like, ooh, dark elves and Sovngrad or whatever, and like they don't try to explain it, and I just think it's kind of fun to just have a little dumb fantasy, high concept wackiness in the movie.
I'm 100% on that point. I really wish in these two Thor movies that they delved more into the Norse mythology and all that kind of stuff, whereas in Thor, it was nice, very like Shakespearean type of score and whatnot. And it's kind of like the same in Thor: The Dark World, the score pretty much. But in Thor: The Dark World, it's just they do way too much. Like they got the convergence, and they got the War of the Realms, and they got the whole
curse
ether
stuff. And,
and it's just that, like, yes, they go into the fantasy, but it would have been better if that's the entire film, and it's not. They keep cutting back to Earth.
Gotta go back to Earth.
Keep cutting back to the human characters,
Kat
which
Dennings
again,
and her intern are
it's just
hanging out in a warehouse or whatever.
And I think like if there is a positive to talk about this film, which like you said, a lot of people don't have positives to talk about, but definitely the Loki and Thor relationship is much stronger in this one than the previous one, and in service of the whole cinematic universe, it actually sets them up as like brothers who actually love each other, and like we actually get to see more into their inner life. Granted, it is not the entirety of the film, it's only like the second act for the most part, but it's a very strong moment, and I think they handled the characters well for that in their growth.
Yeah, I mean, Malekith, not the best.
Yeah.
I think people are a little hard on him. I don't think he's any less interesting than, Yellow Jacket or whatever Mads Mikkelsen's name is in Doctor Strange. Marvel has a villain problem. It just always is, and Loki's gonna take the stage anyway. So
yeah, and it's just, to me, the biggest antagonist of the movie is not Malekith, it's Darcy. Because man, I'm not a fan of her character. Like, don't get me wrong, actress, she does the best that she can. But again, another poorly written character. And it's a lot of like little, like she's supposed to be the quippy, quirky, but her lines aren't even that good. Most of her quips are stating the obvious. Like when Thor beams up, she's like, that was intense. Like, no duh.
Yeah.
That was intense. And it's just, she has way too much screen time in Thor: The Dark World. I looked it up on IMDb. She has 8 minutes and 45 seconds in Thor: The Dark World. Malekith has 8 minutes and 45 seconds in Thor: The Dark World. Why does she have the same amount of screen time as the main antagonist? I don't know. I don't think she deserves that much screen time if she's just going to be saying very obvious quirks and quips.
So what do you think they should have done in Thor 2?
What I think should have happened is, I think the most interesting subplot out of all the whole stuff that they stuffed into this movie is the War of the Realms, in the stasis of what happened in Thor with the bridge being broken and, them not being able to be peacekeepers to all the realms. Everything gets thrown in chaos, and we get this in the first act, and then it's not mentioned again until the very last scene. I think that should have been the movie. That would have been much more interesting. It would have delved into Thor's whole complex of, should I be king? Should I be protector?
Yeah.
And, just scratch the convergence. Who cares? Scratch the whole Jane Foster with the ether. I think the human characters should not have been in this movie and should have just been all in the fantastical world.
I think they could have done that. I think they still could have done Jane Goes to Asgard, because I do find it interesting, just without her getting sick and being sidelined the whole time. I think remove the ether and just have her be the insight into Asgard. Her be the fish out of water this time instead of Thor being the fish out of water.
Yeah.
Could have been a better insight into this crazy world than, as you said, Kat Dennings stating the obvious every 3 seconds. But
yeah, like good point there with her being the fish out of water. I like that. But also, instead of the ether, just have like Malekith find it in the very beginning of the movie, and he's the one that has it throughout the film, and just have him be a character of like, because the Asgardians are trying to be peacekeepers, but people are revolting against it. He could be the viewpoint of the people revolting and be like, show them maybe Asgard shouldn't be peacekeepers. Could have been a much more interesting stuff if they did War of the Realms instead of Thor: The Dark World plus Convergence plus Ether plus War of the Realms.
I don't even remember what the Dark World was, honestly. But, oh well, moving on to what is obviously the best in the trilogy.
Yes.
Thor: Ragnarok. Yeah.
Yes, it was the soft reboot that this series needed. Obviously, it is a departure from the other two in terms of tonally and style and whatnot, but you know what? When Thor is the weakest trilogy, you kind of need it, and it is really a fun ride. Very good visuals. I love the whole art style of like harking back to like the Jack Kirby like comics, and very colorful and spacey, and you even got like the synthesizer score. I love all of that stuff, and the plot is very good too. It's Thor trying to find his place in the world.
Yeah, Taika definitely breathed some new energy into this movie, and it obviously is a very fun movie, which everybody talks about.
Yeah.
But it also does what a third movie in a trilogy should do. It does what Iron Man 3 does, which is we got to take this character back to basics. We got to strip him down, break down the hammer, take his eye out, cut his hair. You know, he's got to have something to fight against again. You know, he's got to have his back against the wall, and they really make that work. Again, think Asgard's pretty cool. I'm bummed that they take him into space instead of doing more with it, but we get some pretty cool Asgard stuff at the end, which is great. And then, obviously, we have Thor and Hulk being a great buddy cop team together, which works really well.
That was fun. And I just think what I like is that Chris Hemsworth looks like he's actually having fun making this movie.
This is the first Marvel movie that came out after Ghostbusters, where I guess the producers were like, whoa, Chris Hemsworth is actually a funny actor. Yeah. Why don't we let him be funny? And it works really well.
Yeah, and it's just I remember reading an interview somewhere that he was actually contemplating still doing Thor after doing all these mediocre Thor movies and only the Avengers ones
Can't blame him.
Yeah, where he could truly shine. And I'm glad Taika Waititi brought that to the table.
Right. And Valkyrie as well.
Yeah, she's also a really great character. Very very good backstory, in terms of she very mirrored to Thor in terms of she's failed in the past and she kind of doesn't want to live that life anymore. Yeah. And very good. And Taika also brings a lot of comedy to the table. It's a very big comedy of a movie.
It is. Sometimes the comedy kind of takes a little bit too much of the stage, I think. I think there are some really, like I said, there are some dramatic moments that kind of lose their punch a little bit whenever they're punctuated by a joke.
Yes, I totally agree. That's one of my biggest criticisms of this movie is just that it just feels like the audience is sitting there waiting for the next punchline and gag to happen, rather than investing into the characters. And like we said, Valkyrie, great character, but in between her intro to her backstory and whatnot, it's in between two giant jokes. And it's just it kind of takes away our emotional connection to her. And also, to me, the biggest joke that hurts the emotional impact of this movie the most is at the very end when Asgard gets blown up. And it's Thor just lost everything there. That's supposed to be his lowest moment of the film, where he's going to bounce back in Infinity War. But then Korg makes a quip about oh, we can rebuild, and it blows up. And it's funny, but it robs the moment of what it should have been. Yeah. And I think that it kind of just hurts what the trilogy sets up as a whole too. Because, granted, the trilogy's not great, but we're supposed to relate to Thor and his world and his characters, and kind of the comedy in Thor Ragnarok just scraps all of that. Kills
it doesn't have the same cohesive arc as the Iron Man trilogy or the Captain America trilogy.
Yeah, it just kills all of his friends off, which he never acknowledges. Kills his world off, and it plays it for a joke. But granted, this was the best that they could do with the source material they had.
And I will say, I was talk about Destroyer and Malekith being pretty bad villains. Kate Blanchett rocks in this movie. Yeah. She's one of my top 5 Marvel villains. I think she's great in this movie.
Yeah, she's really fun, and she really gets into the role, and definitely, which is great because she really didn't want to do a Marvel movie from what I read in the first place. Yeah. But then, Taika was able to bring her into it, and it was really nice. Mm-hmm. But overall, trilogy is not as functional as the Iron Man or the Captain America one. Easily the worst, but that's not to say that you shouldn't go watch Thor Ragnarok. You could skip Thor the Dark World and Thor, unless you're doing an MCU rewatch. But yeah, I would just say that's pretty much it. Thor's okay.
Yeah, I agree. Thor's okay.
Thor's okay. Thank you for watching the College Cinephile's latest video on the trilogies of the MCU. Go ahead and watch our other trilogies, like I said before, of Captain America and Iron Man. Leave a comment down below.
Click the like button.
Yes, please do that. We need more likes, please. It makes us very happy.
The video.
Yes, please. And watch our other videos. Don't forget to subscribe and
like it.
Yes, and don't forget to go watch Avengers Endgame. Gonna be fun.